Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to install the SMB cold air intake for this 2017 Ford F-250 with a 6.7 liter Powerstroke diesel engine. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is use a 10mm to take off the nut that's holding on our negative battery cable to our driver's side battery. I'm just going to loosen this. And then once that's loose, we should be able to pull the cable up and out of the way. Now we're at our passenger side battery and we're going to take the negative cable and the positive cable off. Again, that's going to be a 10mm. You're just going to want to set those out of the way. Next, we're going to remove our battery strap. That's going to be two 10mm nuts. Now, this is going to be on the passenger side of the truck. We don't need to do this on the driver's side. Next, we're going to remove our battery from the vehicle. Next, there's a sensor on the back of our intake that we need to remove. There's going to be a red tab underneath. You're just going to push that out, push in, and then pull it out. Next, I'm going to use a 7mm to loosen the hose clamp holding our intake tube to our airbox. Now with that loose, you should be able to pull it off. Then we're going to go loosen the hose clamp on the other side of the intake tube. Now that we have that loose, we're also going to take this hose off that's connected to our intake tube, and then we're going to remove the intake tube from the vehicle. Now if you look to the passenger side of your airbox, there's going to be two 8mm bolts that we need to remove. And we can actually pull our airbox up and out. Just be careful for any wires that might be attached to it, like our plug that we took off of our intake. We got to pop that off the back of the airbox and then it'll come out. Next, we need to remove our air inlet and our battery tray. To do that, we're first going to pop the first push pin that's holding our inlet in place. Remove that. Now, if we go inside of our battery tray, we can see that we have some wiring harnesses that are attached to the tray itself, so we need to remove those. There's going to be one here on your positive side. There's also one right next to it, right here. Like that. Now we are at the back of our battery tray, and we can see that a wiring harness runs along the side of it. And we're just going to also pop that out right there, and one on this side. Next, you're going to remove 4 13mm bolts that are holding our factory battery tray in place. There's going to be 2 at the bottom and 2 on our passenger side wall. There's also going to be one more clip to the driver's side of your battery tray. You need to pop that, and then you should be able to remove the whole thing from the vehicle. Now the air inlet and battery tray should come out all in one piece. Next, we're going to remove our intake box bracket. That's going to be on our passenger side wall, and that's going to be 2 10mm bolts. Now we're looking at our frame bracket where our battery tray was attached to. What we need to do is remove these 2 harnesses here from this bracket so that we can put a new battery tray bracket on there. So we're just going to use a panel tool and pop those out. Like that. Now we're going to install our new battery tray bracket. And the way that that's going to install, it's going to be kind of an L bracket. The triangular portion is going to go to the outside of this bracket, and it's going to have 3 holes at the top that are going to line up with our 3 holes in our frame bracket. So for the outside holes, we're going to reinstall our factory bolts. Now these are the 2 bolts that we took off the bottom of our battery tray. Just going to reinstall those into the threaded holes. And then your kit is going to provide a bolt with 2 washers and a nut. We're going to put the bolt down through the top with a washer, with another washer, and our locking nut at the bottom. Now we're going to leave these bolts loose for right now, but we are going to reinstall the 2 clips that we took out of the bottom. One right there, and the other one right there. Next, we need to take our factory U-bolt out of our battery tray. Now to do that, we're going to flip this upside down, and we're going to remove the 2 8mm nuts that are holding our air inlet to our battery tray. And once we have those removed, we need to come back to the top, pull up on our locking tabs, to pull those out of the battery tray. There's going to be one on each side, and then that piece will come off. Now to get the bottom portion off of our battery tray, we're just going to take a pry tool pry up on it a little bit, and it'll pop off. Now from here, we can just take and pop out our U-bolt. Next, we're going to install our U-bolt into our new battery tray. Now you're going to want to orient the battery tray in this direction, which would be the 2 holes at the bottom are going to be facing towards me. 2 holes in the sidewall are going to be facing out. And with that orientation, we're going to install the U-bolt with the larger side to the left. Just like that. Now to hold that in place, we're going to use a cable tie. We're just going to go through the 2 holes in the center. Like that. And we'll tighten that down. Next, we need to check our truck to see if we have a primary and a secondary ground cable. Now, if you only have the primary, which would be the one going to your negative battery cable, then you're good. You can skip this next step. Now, if you have 2, like we do, we have a secondary ground right here. We need to remove this 8mm bolt so that we can put our battery tray in. Next, we can install our new battery tray. We can see to the back we actually have a hole that is cut out for our secondary ground. So we're just going to feed that through there. And we're just going to keep pulling that up as we set our tray in place. Just like that. And then that should give us enough slack to put our cable, our ground, back in. Now we can reinstall our secondary ground cable. Now we're going to align the holes in our sidewall with our battery tray, and then we're going to use our provided bolt and washer to go through both of those holes. We're just going to leave them loose for right now. Then we're also going to align the holes in the bottom of our battery tray with our new battery tray bracket. And again, we're going to use our provided bolt and washer. Now with all of our battery tray bolts in, we're going to take a 13mm and tighten them all down. I'm also going to use a 13mm socket and wrench to tighten down the provided bolt holding our battery tray bracket to our frame. Now with that tight, I'm going to remove the 2 factory bolts. Now that we have our battery tray in and all of our bolts are tight, we're going to swap the location of our primary and secondary ground. So the primary is going to come over here, the secondary is going to go over here. That's going to be an 8mm bolt. Now we're going to reinstall our secondary cable. Now the locating pin, you're actually going to have to push that out. And then we're just going to install it right there. And we'll go ahead and tighten that down. Now our primary cable, we're going to have to bend the prong out on it. And we're going to put it where our secondary cable was, but we also want it at an angle so that when we get our battery in here, it'll be easier to attach it. And we'll go ahead and tighten that down. Now we're going to reinstall our battery. Now as you're doing this, make sure you have the negative towards the outside of the vehicle. Now we can reinstall our battery tie down. And we can tighten these up. And we can use a 10mm socket to tighten those down. Next, we're going to remove the nut off of our negative terminal, and we're going to actually take off the tightening mechanism and actually flip it around so that when we go to put it back together, it is facing the right direction. That's going to be a 10mm. You have to push up on the bottom so that the bolt stays captured. But once you get the nut off, you can just kind of take it all apart like that. And that's going to come out as well. And we're going to take this piece out and actually flip it around so that when we tighten it, it's now facing up like that. And then we can go ahead and put the bolt back through. Like that. And then just loosely put the nut back on. Now we're at our positive battery cable, and you can see we have our main cable with our terminal bracket on it here, and then we have 2 additional cables coming off the side that are held on by this 10mm nut here. So we're going to take this off, we're going to put 2 cable extensions on both of these cables, and then we can put it back together. two positive cables are going to get provided cable extensions. We're going to use a gold bolt with a nut to connect those like that. We can use a 10mm wrench and ratcheting wrench to tighten those down. Try to make them as straight as possible. Like that. Once we have those tight, we're going to take provided heat shrink, go over the top, and that's going to go right in between the two connections. So if I feel with my hands, they're right in the middle of the heat shrink, which is where I want it. And then I can use a heat gun to tighten all that up. Then we're going to repeat that on the opposite cable. So now we're going to connect our positive cables to our terminal connector. And then we're going to reinstall our 10mm nut. And we can tighten that down. Next, we're going to install our tube seal onto our airbox. And that's just going to be the large hole on one side, large circular hole. And that's just going to push in. You want to start on one side and then just kind of work your way along. And it should look just like that. Now on one of the other sides of our airbox, we're going to see that there's going to be two smaller circular holes that are right next to each other. We're going to take a foam filter, push that in, and then it's also going to have a cover. It's going to have 3 holes on it. And then we're going to take a small provided screw, go through each of those locations. Just try to get them started by hand first. We take a Phillips head screwdriver and tighten them down. They don't have to be super tight. You don't want to rip out the threads in the airbox. Just snug them up. And then we're going to repeat that on the other one as well. Now if we rotate the airbox again, we're going to have a oblong opening that we can put our silicone inlet on. At the top of that, there's going to be a hole that's going to match up with the hole in the airbox. And we're going to use a couple plastic rivets. One's going to go in the top, and the other one is going to go through the bottom and connect the two pieces together. And then you just have to squeeze it until you feel it pop in. Like that. Now if we rotate our airbox one more time, there's going to be 2 smaller holes at the top and a larger hole at the bottom. The smaller holes are going to get rubber grommets. You can just push those right in. And the larger hole is kind of up to you guys whether you want to plug it up with a silicone seal or if you want to run with it open. Now if you're going to have it open, that's just going to open up your filter to a little bit more dirt and grime and that kind of thing. So you're going to have to clean it more often, but you are going to get more airflow. But if you're going to choose to plug it up, that's just going to push right in just like that. Next, we're going to use a T20 Torx bit to take off this sensor that's on our factory airbox. So now we have our new intake tube, and we need to install our sensor onto the tube right here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take our sensor, we're going to align our provided gasket with it, and also we are going to get a pad that will align with it as well. So we want to make sure all of our holes are lined up. They are. And then we can put it through our intake tube, line up those holes, and then we're going to use a provided Phillips head screw and go through there, and then we can snug these up. Again, you don't want to go too tight on these, just snug them down. Next, we're going to put our airbox in the truck. Now you want to make sure you have all of the cables and wires all pulled out to the side. And then we're just going to fit it right in. Be careful of your rubber grommets on the side, because if they get snagged, they will want to fall out. But if we're careful, everything should fit in place. Now we're going to use 2 factory bolts to go in through our sidewall of our intake and into the sidewall of the truck. We're just going to get those started by hand. I'm not going to tighten them down yet. We're also going to use 2 factory bolts to go in through the bottom of the airbox to our frame here and here. And again, we're just going to get those started by hand. Now with all of our bolts loosely installed, we can take a 13mm and tighten them down. We're going to tighten down our 2 sidewall bolts as well with a 13mm. Next, we can reinstall our push pin on our new inlet. Now, looking at our service port in relation to our airbox, we can see that when our tube goes in, this port is going to be in the way. So what we actually need to do is just bend it slightly so that it's no longer obstructing our tube from going in. Now we're going to take our intake tube with our coupler and our hose clamps already attached to the back end. They're just going to slide over the intake tube, and we're going to put that into our airbox. And it should just shove in. Be careful of your sensor when you're pushing this in, just like that. And you want to push it all the way up until the last stop ring on your intake tube. And then what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it around just like this, and then we're going to match it up with our connector on the other side. Now we can lift this tube out of the way. Again, keep rotating our tube until we get it around to our turbo inlet. And then once we got it around there, we're just going to slide it over the top. Now we can use a flathead screwdriver to tighten down our hose clamps. Your kit is also going to come with an extension for your sensor. We're just going to plug that in, engage our red tab at the top, and then plug that back into our sensor like that. Again, engage the red clip, and then once we get the battery and everything back together, we can go ahead and zip tie that up and make it look nice. Next, we're going to take our filter with hose clamp and stick that inside our airbox and attach it to our intake tube. Just like that. And we can go ahead and tighten down our hose clamp. Again, we're going to use a flathead screwdriver to tighten down the hose clamp. Next, we're going to install our lid seal into the groove around the top of our airbox. We're just going to push that down and go all the way along the groove. Just like that. And if you have any excess, you can just trim that off. Next, we're going to fit our clear lid on top. It's only going to fit one way. Just kind of line up your holes, and then we're going to use provided Phillips head bolt and washer in each of those locations. Try to get those started by hand if you can first. And then we'll go back through and tighten them up. Again, make sure you don't over tighten these. You just want to snug it up. Now, before we can put our positive battery terminal back on, we need to flip the tightening mechanism. So what we need to do is take the nut off, which is again going to be a 10 millimeter. I want to make sure the bottom of the bolt is in between the brackets so that it'll hold it in place while you loosen it. Alright, so once we get it all apart, you can see the tab sticking out on this side. What we're going to do is completely take that out and flip it around so that it tightens on the opposite side. And then we can put it back together. So that's going to be bolt coming up through the back with the tightening portion at the bottom facing the inside. The top portion facing the outside so that they fit together, like so. And then we can loosely put the nut back on. And now we can put our positive battery terminal back on the truck. We want to make sure that our positive lines are faced as close to the intake as possible. We don't want them to get too overheated on anything on the outside. And then we can go ahead and tighten this down. Now I can hook up my negative battery terminal. Now we can also reconnect our negative cable on our driver's side battery. Now all we have to do is zip tie up any loose wires. Alright guys, that completes the installation. If you have any questions, give us a call or visit us online.